It cost me exactly $65 in scrap wood to build this raised bed. It saved my passion for gardening when my hips started giving out. But the truth is, the real magic is hidden underground. A silent wicking system that waters itself for an entire week, and a U-shaped design that lets me harvest everything without ever bending my spine. Let me show you what I discovered after a terrifying summer day when I reached my absolute physical limit in my own garden. I remember it clearly. The sun was beating down on the backyard. I was bent over, pulling weeds creeping into the base of my tomatoes. As I suddenly stood up, a dark wave of dizziness hit me. My stamina was completely drained. Both hips flared up with pain, like rusty hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. Swaying unsteadily in the middle of the garden I had built with my own hands, I thought about giving up. I know many friends my age who have regretfully walked away from their piece of land, not because their love for plants ran dry, but because their spines and legs could no longer carry the burden. But nature is inherently generous. It never demands that we drain our own life force. Those glossy magazines and big box stores always try to convince us that the only solution is to throw money at cold, galvanized metal beds, and expensive automatic irrigation systems. Standing in front of that shiny display the other day, I just smiled and slowly walked past. My garden is a peaceful sanctuary. It should never become a financial trap at the mercy of inflation. Instead, I went to the local lumber yard at the edge of town, gathering scrap pieces of cedar for a fraction of the price. From those rustic, seemingly discarded planks, I started building a space that is truly joint-friendly. Because when you design a garden bed you can harvest sitting down, you are not just building a frame for dirt. You are resetting the boundaries of peace. Every act of tending is now completely effortless. Mother Earth is respectfully raised to meet your hands, rather than forcing your spine to bend and sacrifice itself. My shoulders stay perfectly relaxed. My heart rate stays calm. Those exhausting spells of dizziness are permanently a thing of the past. I only need to relax in the midst of nature, breathing in the rich, earthy scent of microbes, breathing in the damp soil. Look at how this U-shaped design embraces the space. Unlike traditional rectangular beds that are boxy and cold, the U-shape is like a wide, gentle embrace, welcoming the gardener into the center of life. Years ago, I used to hunch over garden beds that were up to 4 feet wide to pull a weed or pick a tomato sitting way in the middle. I had to stretch my arm out, curve my spine, and hold that position for minutes at a time. In body mechanics, when we overreach our center of gravity, an invisible but incredibly cruel shear force presses down on the lower lumbar discs. That dull ache at the end of the day, the one we so often blame on age, actually comes from a flawed spatial design. Plants never want to cause us pain. We just haven't learned how to arrange our space so that both can be at peace. That is why I narrowed the width of each arm in this U-shaped bed down to a maximum of 2 feet. I call this radius the zero-strain reach. From a stationary sitting position in the middle of the pathway, my relaxed arm perfectly reaches the furthest point on the opposite side of the bed. My spine stays naturally straight. My shoulders remain free of tension. Every movement of pruning leaves, sowing seeds, or gently tilling the surface now flows like a morning meditation where the body and the rhythm of the garden become one. There is a quiet truth lying within the boards that make up this garden bed. If you walk into any hardware store, you will see neat rows of chemically treated wood. They are uniform and promise to last for decades. But to achieve that artificial durability, heavy metal compounds were forced into the core of the wood. When those boards are placed into the earth, facing summer rainstorms and the tireless breaking down by microbes, those chemicals slowly leach out. They silently seep into the damp soil, damaging the fragile mycorrhizal fungi network, and ultimately travel straight into the tender lettuce leaves we place on our family dinner tables. I refuse to bring such a hidden liability into my sanctuary. Instead of compromising, I went back to the local lumber yard and gathered those leftover, rustic pieces of scrap cedar that people intended to throw away. At the scrap wood pile that day, I left behind a small amount of money, no more than the cost of a few breakfasts, but what I brought home was a treasure of nature. Cedar carries within it a magnificent natural defense mechanism. The resin of this tree contains a high amount of thujoplassin oils, a biological antifungal and rot-resistant compound synthesized by nature itself over millions of years of evolution. When I was cutting these cedar planks myself, a warm, earthy scent of resin filled the air, washing away the fatigue of a summer afternoon. These boards are by no means perfect. They have small cracks, rough knots bearing the marks of wind and weather. But it is exactly that roughness that creates a natural beauty. Over time, under the sun, cedar won't rot, but will slowly turn a quiet silvery gray, blending into the colors of the earth and sky. A rustic structure like this, if put together correctly, can stand strong for over 10 years. It is not just a garden bed. It is a small legacy, a proof that we can build lasting things by leaning on the biological traits of nature, instead of trying to use chemicals to fight the decay of time. Whenever summer knocks on the door, bringing waves of scorching heat, watering often becomes a burden that drains both our time and our energy. The gardening industry is always pushing us to buy expensive automatic sprinkler systems with a tangled mess of hoses to water from the top down. But in nature, the great ancient forests never wait for water to fall from the sky every day. They silently draw cool groundwater from deep within the earth. And that is exactly what we are going to recreate at the bottom of this garden bed. A quiet underground wicking system, a time machine that helps you reclaim your leisurely afternoons. Let me show you the secret lying beneath that loose, fluffy layer of mulch. At the very bottom of the wooden bed, I laid down a smooth waterproof liner, then filled it with a layer of river rock combined with a thin, yet incredibly tough layer of geotextile fabric. This fabric acts as a biological filter, allowing water to pass through but absolutely keeping the fertile soil above from collapsing and turning the reservoir into mud. The magic begins here through a pure physical phenomenon called capillary action. Just like the way an oil lamp wick slowly draws up liquid fat, defying gravity to maintain a flame, the tiny capillaries between the soil particles automatically pull water up from the reservoir below. The soil only takes exactly the amount of water it needs to maintain perfect moisture. Never too much, never waterlogged. Your garden has now become an astonishingly self-sustaining ecosystem. I can comfortably leave home for a whole week to visit old friends, and when I return, My lettuce arches are still plump with life, but there is a fragile, invisible boundary that dictates the life or death of this entire system, the aerobic zone. Plant roots and beneficial soil microbes need oxygen to breathe. If the water rises too high, the soil turns into an anaerobic swamp, and the roots will suffocate and rot. The solution to this complex biological problem lies in one incredibly simple step: a tiny overflow hole drilled right through the wooden board, placed at a height exactly equal to the depth of the water-retaining gravel. Whenever there is a heavy rain, or if I accidentally pour in too much water, the excess will obediently trickle out through this hole. It establishes a permanent safety limit, protecting the breath of Mother Earth. And to deliver water to the bottom layer quietly, I placed a small plastic pipe in the corner of the bed. Remember a hard-learned lesson that once cost me an entire growing season. The bottom end of the pipe that touches the gravel must be cut at a 45-degree angle. If you cut it flat, the pressure from the surrounding rocks will seal the mouth of the pipe, causing the water to back up and choke the system. With just one simple angled cut, the flow of water will always find its way to blend into the earth. When we stop heavily watering the surface, a beautiful biological transformation takes place beneath the roots. Following their natural hydrotropic instinct, the roots no longer curl up lazily in the shallow soil near the sun. They begin a journey, reaching deep into the darkness to find the groundwater. As a result, we get deeply anchored root systems and healthy, resilient plants that can withstand strong winds. There is another financial liberation right here in this very bed. If I had to fill the enormous volume of a 30-inch tall raised bed with bags of organic soil bought from the store, I would be facing a painfully expensive materials bill, an absolute waste that is not inflation-proof at all. The answer lies in an ancient farming method called hugelkultur. Before pouring in the soil, I filled the bottom half of the bed with rotting logs, dry branches, and fallen leaves gathered from the corners of the yard. Through rains and time, this mass of wood acts like a giant sponge, holding onto water tightly and slowly decomposing. They nourish a miraculous mycorrhizal fungal network, releasing carbon and nutrients into the soil for many years to come. A garden bed that started from seemingly discarded things now weaves its own cycle of life, abundant and completely effortless. There is an invisible space that we often forget when setting out to build a garden, and that is the empty space between the garden beds. In our rushed lives, people tend to cram as much soil and as many plants into a yard as possible, with the desire to maximize surface yield. But the true productivity of a garden is not just measured by the number of tomato baskets you harvest in a season. It is also measured by the endurance of the gardener themselves, by the long years ahead, where your spine and your legs can still smile as you step out into the garden every morning. For that very reason, the space in the middle of this U-shaped bed is not an accident. It was carefully measured and stopped at a precise number, 32 inches, just this one tiny detail, yet it accounts for 10% of the success or failure of the entire design. 32 inches is a beautiful distance. It is just wide enough for me to gently pull open a folding canvas garden stool and place it perfectly in the center. It is also the standard size for a wheelchair, or a walker of an older friend to smoothly roll in without bumping or scratching the cedar boards. When I sit down on this stool, resting my feet on the cool gravel, a strange sense of liberation spreads through my body. With a 32-inch gap, my knees are bent at a perfect 90-degree angle, unconfined and uncompressed. I can gently rotate 360 degrees, reach out to harvest the bunches of basil in front of me, then slowly turn to prune the yellowing tomato leaves behind me, all in a single stationary posture. There is no sudden twisting on the lower back, no instability from having to stand on your toes. In the past, when the pathways were too narrow, I constantly had to squeeze through, my clothes catching on rough, thorny branches, and sometimes accidentally stepping on tender little roots creeping out of the soil edge. Now, all that physical stress has completely vanished. This garden is designed to serve the human body, understanding the limits of the musculoskeletal system as we pass the age of 50. It doesn't demand that you contort your body to fit rigid beds of dirt. Rather, Mother Earth has stepped back a beat, leaving a quiet, empty space, embracing you with deep compassion. Harvesting is now an effortless joy, a time of true meditation among the green leaves. Sitting here, looking at the fluffy sawdust mulch at eye level, I realize this garden bed offers much more than just protecting my spine. With a height of 30 inches, it accidentally became a perfect natural fortress. For decades, I have spent so much effort and money putting up wire mesh fences, exhaustingly digging trenches to keep out hungry rabbits every spring. But rabbits naturally have an instinctual fear of elevated spaces where they cannot see inside. Now, without a single piece of sharp metal wire or any expensive barriers, my tender patches of lettuce still peacefully sprout under the morning dew. Nature always has a way of solving problems through understanding behavior, rather than stressful confrontation. Right at my feet right now, our old family dog is sleeping soundly on the gravel. With the old ground-level beds, I always had to be on guard, afraid that careless footsteps would trample the young shoots. But with this raised U-shaped bed, the space is compassionately layered. Small animals and children have a safe retreat below, while the tomato clusters proudly reach for the sun above. A quiet coexistence, completely devoid of any shooing or scolding. Gardening in your 50s, after all, is a journey to find tranquility. It is not an exhausting labor, nor a trade-off for aches and pains. When we know how to reset our boundaries, nature will automatically function and nourish us. If you want to dive deeper into this philosophy, into the quiet principles that Mother Earth has taught me, you can find them in the little slow gardening handbook I have written down. I've left the link in the description as a gift to my kindred spirits. But here's the thing. That sturdy bed we built today is just the foundation. If you feel it wrong, you'll still end up on your knees, and all of this work will be wasted. In the next video, I'm revealing the exact heirloom tomato planting method that lets me harvest for months without ever touching the ground. Tap the screen right now to watch it, because the planting window for this season is closing fast.